Hello and welcome to Who Corner to Corner podcast. My name is Jeff and I'm joined as always by my good friend Paul. That's
Hi.
Paul there. If you're listening, not watching, he's waving. We probably should come up with a new intro really for the show, shouldn't we?
Yeah,
always say
probably.
that every week, yeah. But this is Meet the Whovians 4. So
Yes.
if you've listened to us before, the Meet the Whovians episodes are ones where we chat to other fans and we talk about all sorts of things, how they discovered the show, their favourite doctors, books that they love, audios they love, all sorts of different things. So this week we're joined by Dom, who is at DomTorWho from Twitter. We're joined by Fraser Gregory, who is at Felix Fraser, I believe is his Twitter handle. And we're also joined by Mestor the Magnificent.
Mestor the Magnificent. It's great, that one.
Yeah, and we mostly talk about books with Mestor because he's a big book fan.
Big book fan.
So that's enough from us. So let's go meet the Whovians.
Let's go for it.
So Dom's joined us tonight. We chatted a little while ago, didn't we, as part of our We Love 13th Doctor celebration episode, where we talked about Jodie Whittaker and her Doctor and what she means to us and why we love her so much. But tonight we wanted to have a chat for one of our Meet the Whovians episodes where we talk to other fans about all sorts of Who-related stuff. So I'm just going to go straight in here, Dom. Mm-hmm. How did you discover Doctor Who?
Ooh, big question. It's a weird one. The answer is really weird. So it's like in two parts. So
okay, we can have a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first time I watched Doctor Who, I was 11 or 12. I was at my friend's house and we were just like watching TV for some reason, and we were just switching channels, and at one point we ended up on the French-Canadian sci-fi channel, which is called Z. Anyway, random information that you don't need at all. But, and like all I remember from what I saw on screen that day was a blonde woman without a face, which is the Edith Lantern in series 2, sorry. And then like I remember being like, ooh, that's interesting, I like that. And then my friend got scared and switched the channel. So I remember walking home that day, just thinking over and over again, okay, I need to look up that show. Like I looked at the TV guide to see what the name of the show was, which, Doctor Who. So I was like, okay, Doctor Who, all the way back home. Yeah,
don't forget.
And then I got back home and forgot about it. First thing I just forget about it. Yeah. So that's when my first meeting with Doctor Who ended. And then it was like, I guess 4 or 5 years later, was on Tumblr.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Some time had passed.
Yeah. So I was like 16 at that point. And, and I got into BBC Sherlock before I got into Doctor Who, but because of the friends I made in that fandom, I guess like it kind of merged with Doctor Who, so I kept seeing stuff on Tumblr about Doctor Who, and I was like, it was around the time where we didn't know who River Song was, and I was really curious about that. Like, I kept seeing stuff about it. I was like, what's going on with that show? And then, kind of randomly, I was watching an interview with Helena Bonham Carter on Craig Ferguson's show, and he always had this little TARDIS on his desk, and then at some point, like I remember this, and he just kind of took the TARDIS and went like, maybe one day you're going to be in that. And I was like, wait, maybe she could be the Doctor? What? A woman could be the Doctor? And I guess like between River Song and that, I was like, oh my God, I need to catch up in case that happens. So I was 16. It was so it was between the the first part of series 6 and like the second part, so between A Good Man Goes to War and Let's Kill Hitler, like that's the moment in life where I just kind of binge everything. So I started with 9, and then I got to series 2 with the Edith Lantern, and I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me?
That's that program. That's the one I watched.
Yeah, that memory
Ting.
Comes flooding back.
Yeah. It's crazy to think like all those years ago. I mean, it's been so long, but like I could have been a Whovian from like being age 11 or 12, but it took
think of all those years you missed out on.
And like that's a peak age to watch Doctor Who. I'm so mad at myself. Why did you forget? So but I'm here now. It's fine.
Yeah.
But that's destiny in action that it came back round like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny, isn't it? You see something sometimes there, and it kind of captures the imagination, and it scared your friend, and she switched off, but you were thinking, oh, what's that? Because I've done that with hearing a song on the radio or something, and you think, oh my god, that's what is that? I try to remember that lyric or something, but then the day goes on, doesn't it? And that thing starts to fade a little
on your
bit.
hands.
And, well, like Yaz, yeah, or record it on your phone or something.
Okay, there's a technological answer.
Yeah. I didn't have that at the time, like 2006.
No. So you could have written it on your hand, yeah. But that's brilliant that it came back around. And I suppose, but where you're living, it was probably quite tricky to get hold of it on TV, I guess, was it?
I mean, on that Sci-Fi channel, it played. I guess we got the French translation at some point, maybe like a year or two later. So, and I think it's pretty much still the same now. But in terms of like, had I wanted to watch it in English at that point, I wouldn't have been able to, because my English wasn't good enough to watch stuff at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's not my first language. But it's accessible in that sense. Like it was on TV, but it's not this huge phenomenon here. So it's kind of not that well known. So like your friends don't talk about it at school, so you're not tempted to go watch it. So we don't have that kind of like whole process of like it being part of our culture that much. So
I find it quite interesting when we talk to people like you or Millie Mackenzie, who's in New Zealand, how they discover the show and watch it, bearing in mind it's not on, every Saturday night like we used to have, just easy access, So the fact that, people discover it from outside of the UK and then kind of hunt it down and fall in love with it, I think is brilliant, really.
The joy of the internet.
So that's it.
The joy of the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, that's a really good origin story for how
I like
you discovered
that.
Who, actually, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's really good.
It's quite interesting, actually,
very
because
good.
you kind of imagine now that this streaming thing with Disney Plus should make it a lot easier for people outside the UK to find. So that's a massive benefit there.
That's going to be interesting to watch how it unfolds. I'm really curious to see that.
Yeah, I hope they have, the back catalogue on there for
That'd
people
be great,
to discover,
wouldn't it?
and it's not just the new stuff that goes out. So, Dom, I probably know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyway, and you can tell us and our listeners. So, which Doctor and which era is your favourite?
Oh, here we go, straight in again. Look at that.
I'm just gonna pause you there, Paul. We might end up being surprised here, but I don't think so.
So, I never liked the idea of having a favorite Doctor, because like all of them are the same person. So even when I first started watching the show, and at that point I thought David was my Doctor, but I never called him my favorite Doctor. And I still stand by that statement that I don't have a favorite, but my Doctor, in the sense of like I relate to them and what they represent, is the 13th Doctor. No surprise. And I mean, what I was saying earlier about like the thought of having a woman playing the Doctor getting me to watch the show, like I started watching the show already kind of hoping for that moment to happen. So there was no way she wasn't going to be my Doctor, but it just really like it worked really well. Like the vibe just suits me 100%. I adore her, and I guess her era and just all of it. But I like all of the show, but it holds a special place in my heart.
No, I mean we're the same. I think you're right. I love all the Doctors. There isn't one that I don't enjoy when I watch them or listen to an audio. And I'm not into this ranking. Doctors favourite to worst and all this stuff. I don't like that. But like you and probably I think I can speak for Paul here. There's something about Jodie's Doctor that really kind of connected with us, and she's my Doctor, and I love her and her version enormously, but I love all Doctors as well.
It's a great thing about Doctor Who. I know we've said it a lot of times, but it's just constant change. You know, that for me is the attraction to it. It's a show that never sits still. It's got a massive back catalogue which you can just dip into and spend as much time in as you want, or you can just forget about all that and just plough forward. Just take the next thing as it comes. You can soak up all the history of it, all the backstage stuff, all the cast and crew, all the recurring storylines, recurring monsters. Or you don't have to. You know, I think everyone's experience of Doctor Who is completely unique, and there are things that will kind of phase in and out of as we kind of go through our lives. But at certain points, we go through something in our own lives and we see something reflected back at us from Doctor Who, and we think, oh my gosh, that is now for me, that moment right there, that story, that actor, that relationship, whatever it is, that suddenly just hits me at that point, and it's really, really special. And we've all got those things, but they're all very different and very unique to all of us. And that's why we get loads of conflict on Twitter and stuff like that as well. Because then that becomes one person's ideal Doctor Who and nothing else will do sometimes, you know. So that's the downside of that, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, Dom, you were a fan of the show already and enjoying it. And so, like, for me, I was kind of a 10 out of 10 fan.
10 out of 10! 10 out of 10! It's a 10
I
from
loved it. And then Jodie turns up, and that just kind of goes through the roof. And I was like, God, my favourite show just became even better and even more amazing. So was it a bit like that for you? Was there any particular moment that kind of, other than a female Doctor, was there one moment or anything that kind of really stood out for you, and you thought that this is it for me? It's become, the next level up, something extra special.
I mean, I guess I got really lucky with like the start of the 13th Doctor era, because I was at New York Comic Con when the episode premiered, and Jodie was there with Chibnall and Matt Strevens. So that moment for me kind of, set the tone for the rest of the era, I guess. So like it couldn't get better than that, because I was in a room, like I was in Madison fucking Square Garden with thousands of people and Jodie and Chris and Matt. And it doesn't get better than that, so it's just like
that's pretty
kind
special.
of fills you with joy. Absolutely. And then when COVID hit, that kind of everything kind of went to shit. But then I had friends online, and kind of created a network of friends from all over the world. That meant that I wasn't alone, even though like maybe at home I was. So I guess that just like all of that kind of really made that era even more special. Even like it's not only about the show, it's about all those little things as well, I think, that really kind of made it what it is for me.
Those little friendships that you build through a common kind of love of something.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's that's like you and me, isn't it, Paul? Our
it is.
Love
yes, it is, Jeff.
Across Twitter, and that's how we met you, Dom, and various other people that we talk with on on the podcast and on chat and stuff. And what you just said there is that a cat?
Yes, that's my cat.
Is that your cat?
He's gonna cry for the whole time.
Oh no!
So, I'm just gonna...
It's been ignored.
Yeah.
Hey, that's a very big cat. That looks like a tiger.
Yeah.
He, she?
That's Jarvis.
Jarvis.
Yes.
Big Jarvis. Hi, Jarvis.
Named after Tony Stark.
Doesn't look very
He
happy,
named after
AI.
Mr. Jarvis and Agent Carter.
Yes, there you go.
Well, yes, that was the start of
that was the start of Jarvis.
Of Jarvis AI, wasn't it? Yeah, brilliant. Yeah.
Go to sleep now. Bye-bye.
Dom throws the cat at the wall. She didn't really, honestly. She was good
She's
with
on
the cat.
my bed.
You throw that cat at the wall, it'll go straight through it, I think.
Drop kicked it.
It's a big cat.
Dropped it Pating style. Drop kick Pating style.
No, Jeff. It's just cruel.
My poor fluffy cat.
Add some sound effects in there. So, Dom, do you listen to much Big Finish?
I try to, but I'm like I can't keep up to date. There's just so much, and it costs so much money.
It's true. Yeah, I'm with you on this one. Yeah. I kind of wish they'd slow down a little bit, to be honest.
Yeah, I think they'll have Jodie at some point. A kind of part of me would like them to announce it tomorrow. But a part of me would like them to wait a few years, like when they said that Tennant was coming on to Big Finish. That was really special then, because it'd been a few years after the show, and maybe we were never going to get it again. It's a bit like now Capaldi says he's done with the show and he won't come back. I mean, it could of course be a lie, but if he was ever to go and do Big Finish, it'd be really special. So there's with Jodie, I'd love it, but I also kind of want that weight would make it extra special, when it does happen. But Paul, you feel the same as Dom, don't you? But I don't disagree either, but there is so much Big Finish, and it's hard to keep on top of it.
Most of my Big Finish CDs are still in their cellophane wrapping. So I rarely.
Is that because you've split the side?
Well, to be fair, I mean I've downloaded quite a few, so I just tend to play them on my phone. But there's a lot that I bought that I just haven't got round to listening to, and it just seems like a shame, because these things they're not cheap. They're really not. I know they do deals on occasion, which is great, but it still equates to a huge amount of cash, really, if you want to get every single Big Finish. So I do get a bit annoyed with the race of output, and it annoys me to a degree, because I don't think, I mean, the last few, I listened to one a couple of weeks back when I was in London, and I was just walking through town, so I had it in my phones, and that was good. It was a good story, but that was the best one I've heard for a long time. And I do think there's a kind of averageness to a lot of Big Finish. Just a personal opinion. I don't get as excited by them as I used to, and I don't feel like I need them as much as I used to. I'm sorry, that sounds really negative, but I've kind of had it with spending ridiculous amounts of money on stuff like that.
No,
he says with three copies of The Abominable Snowman on Steelbook, which is accidental.
Hypocrite.
By accident. I didn't really do that.
There is a huge amount of Big Finish, and I tend to I go through phases where I'll get not much, and then I might go and order like 3 things in the space of a couple of months, but I tend to focus, I tend to limit it, so like I like the Unit series, and I'll buy like 10th Doctor stuff, but I don't buy all the 4th or all the 6th or whatever Doctor. Like I like the 3rd Doctor adventures, but I'll buy it if it's on an offer, perhaps. So I think you just have to kind of pick and choose, really, and there's no need to listen to all of it, and I think that would probably be impossible as well, to be honest. So we're joined for this episode of Meet the Whovians by a name that some of you might recognise from your Twitter travels. It's Mr. Fraser Gregory, champion of the damned.
Yay! Hello, Fraser.
Good evening.
How are you?
Hello. I'm very good. How are you?
Yes, good. Good, thank you. For people who are listening, would you like to tell them what your Twitter handle is? Because for the people watching, we'll put it up on screen, you see.
My Twitter handle is @FelixFraser. And yes, I am the champion of the damned.
So would you like to explain both of those things, your handle,
you kind of have to,
and
mate.
what being a champion of the damned? It sounds like an Anne Rice novel or something.
The Twitter handle was just something I came up with. I can't remember exactly where that started. Obviously Fraser's my name. Felix just kind of came into it somehow. A champion of the damned is the nickname that my good friend Joe Ford gave me when I very first started podcasting. The first podcast I ever did was the Space Museum on A Hamster with a Blunt Penknife. We did the commentary on that. So I came on and said wonderful things about the Space Museum, which led into me then going on to Joe's other podcast, which is the Naimon Be Praised, which was discussing the Dominators. So again, I came on and said, nice things about the Dominators.
Yes. Quark life.
Quark life.
Indeed.
And that's where that came from. Obviously, I I am the man who comes on and says nice things about the stories that no one else wants to.
I think probably that's where I first came across you, actually, because I thought, oh my gosh, here's somebody actually talking about the Dominators, and they're talking about it in a really positive way. There's somebody who likes the Dominators, and I honestly thought that in life I was pretty much the only person who had anything positive to say about the Dominators, because I've always loved it. I mean, the first time I came across it was when I got it on as a Target novel when it first came out. And I didn't even know it was a Troughton story because it didn't have Troughton on the cover of it or anything. I had to kind of figure it out.
No.
You know, when they're talking about Zoe and Jamie and that, and you think, yes, it's a Troughton story, but then I'm trying to picture it and I think, well, I don't know where this is or anything. And I always loved it. And when it came to actually watching it on the TV, which I think might have been UK Gold Times or something like that, I thought, well, this is all right. Why is everybody complaining about this? It's a perfectly good story with a load of good stuff going on in it. And it's very different. Like all of the Doctor Who stories in that season, they're all quite unique. They've all got their own little individual kind of little quirkinesses and stuff like that. So, yeah, when I heard you sort of gassing on about it, I thought, yay, there's a champion right there, my friend. Fly that flag. That's what I thought. Exactly those things.
Yeah, I've flown that flag.
Die on that hill.
Since.
That's what I meant to say.
Oh,
yeah.
I have many hills that I've died on many times.
Is Kill the Moon one of those hills? Because I've got one hill for that. Well, I did until we did our podcast about it. He crushed my soul.
Absolutely, Kill the Moon is quite a good episode.
It's got some great drama in it.
The trick with Kill the Moon is you need to ignore the moon.
Well, you need to ignore everything, really, I think, with Kill the Moon. And then it's all right.
Or just accept that, the moon's an egg. It's fine.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Just go with it.
If you go into that story and think this is a story about the moon being an egg, then you're not going to get on with it. If you go into the story and realise the real story is actually what's happening between the Doctor and Clara, then it's a lot better for having that viewpoint on it.
Yeah,
the whole basis of the story is the Doctor putting Clara in that awkward position where she has to choose,
her,
and forcing that upon her. The fact that the moon is an egg is neither here nor there, to be honest.
It's not even like it's a fairly minor part of it, really, isn't it? Yeah.
And yet the story kind of presents it right front and centre. There's no getting away from it. It's always there. It's present in pretty much every conversation. So I am interested how this is possible to forget about this thing when it's literally thrown at you in every bit of dialogue.
It's a MacGuffin,
but if it's a MacGuffin, does it have any purpose in the story then? Should it even be there?
It has to be there, otherwise Clara's choice is meaningless.
And none of it
because the point is that the Doctor makes Clara make this choice. Does she save the Earth or does she save the moon?
Yes,
the creature
and then
that
she puts it to the vote.
Yeah, which but that is her choice. She has to make that decision. Yes, she puts it to the vote and she ignores the vote,
thereby reflecting what the kind of Doctor has to go through every single time. And it's the first time we kind of see that immediacy thrown at us, really, because Clara being the viewpoint character, that us that. So now we understand the choices that the Doctor makes each time. They're not not always
if
easy.
That was, if that was the moon of Clom or whatever, it doesn't have that connection. It doesn't have that same impact on us.
Possibly, except you could argue that actually it doesn't have any impact at all because all the fantasy element of it creates such a cognitive sort of dissonance that it's difficult to really. If you're struggling to relate to the whole idea of the moon as an egg, are you going to buy into the rest of the story? And it's different with each individual, I would say. My personal thing is that the story by putting that right front and centre kind of knocks everything else out of kilter. And actually, if they did make it the fantasy moon of Clom and told the same story in an allegorical manner, actually I think it would make it more palatable. At least for me it would anyway. That's just my take on it, you know what I mean? Like, I don't pretend to be an expert or anything, but
We're all allowed to be wrong on the podcast from time to
indeed, yes, yeah. But to be honest, what I love about your stuff, Fraser, is that did you put a tweet out quite recently? I think, didn't you, about challenging me to find something positive in every Doctor Who story, and I think you did it, which was fantastic.
I've done a couple of those threads now. I started with the 13th Doctor because it was a kind of a time, I think we were kind of coming into Power of the Doctor, and there was a lot of sort of negativity towards Chris Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker and that whole era, and I just thought, you know what, stuff this. I'm sick of seeing people slating stuff on my timeline. Let's do the opposite. I'm
going to insert the choir here going, oh.
That's Murray Gold's choir. We'll come to him in a minute. But yeah, it was a case of let's celebrate what's actually good about this era, because no era has got 100% hit rate.
Yeah.
There's always stories that fall a little bit flat for you or don't work for you or whatever. So it was a case of each story, I'm going to say something nice about each story.
Yeah, that's
so
brilliant.
I put that thread out, and then once I'd done that was quite a uplifting experience. I thought I'll do the same about the 12th Doctor.
Yeah.
So I did a similar thread about the 12th Doctor. I'm working up to an 11th Doctor one. Similar. I just need to watch a few more stories, because there's a few where I haven't seen them in long enough time to actually be able to really pick that really nice thing out of it.
Did you find it difficult doing that, or like for me, I can always find something to enjoy and something that I like in an episode, and so for me, like, I'm just thinking we should do a podcast where we all pick some episodes and have to say something nice about something that we liked about them. I don't think I'd find it that difficult to do it, but how was it for you, Fraser? Did you find it? Did you watch anything and you thought, God, what can I like here? The theme music,
Some were harder than others. Some were harder because I wanted to see a lot of things. Something like the 11th Hour. I could talk for hours. I have talked for hours about everything that's fantastic about the 11th Hour. Something like, say, Sleep No More is a bit more tricky, because when that doesn't land for you, then it's harder for you to see the good. I think Arachnids in the UK is one that I don't get on with that well, but there's reasons why I don't get on with that story. There's reasons I don't enjoy it, but there's also things that is in there to find. The ones that were trickiest was against the ones that I haven't really watched that much. So if I haven't seen an episode, say The Woman Who Lived, I haven't watched that in quite some time.
Yeah.
So that's harder for us to get from memory, and that's where I kind of am with the 11th Doctor at the minute. There's a few where I need to just go back and just say, look, let's rewatch this.
Refresh.
Because what I found is going back and rewatching now is a lot more of a positive experience. You kind of build an impression in your mind of what a season's like and what a series is like, and it can really kind of drag you down. Something like season 7B, Matt Smith's final, that you think that was a dreary run of stories, and then actually you go and watch it and you think, no,
it was all right.
No, it wasn't.
I was a bit like that with Series 6. For a long time I thought it started out brilliant, and then it was just kind of okay, and then I rewatched it a couple of years ago now, I can't remember when, but I thought actually I was wrong. This was stronger in my head than I'd kind of remembered it, and I think like you're saying, maybe at the time when I watched it just didn't quite click. I don't know, but coming back to it a bit older, a bit more grown up, hopefully could sort of see it a bit differently and enjoy it a bit more.
Because I think what happens is it's a point that Jason Thompson has made on another podcast, is we have an expectation of watching a new story. You expect.
It's always a difficult thing
to
to overcome, isn't it?
Yeah. You have like a preconception. Legend of the Sea Devils. for example, you know, people went into that thinking this is going to be a certain story, and it turned out not to be that story, and that was, you know, causes a disappointment. So sometimes you do need to kind of step back a bit and give yourself a bit of time to to come
and let
back
them tell you the story rather than kind of, we've talked about this, haven't we, Paul, rather than sort of you know, headcanoning, you know, your wishes too much, because that road seems to always lead to disappointment, you know.
I always think that's one of the biggest issues with something like Hellbent, you know, which is, I mean, I love Hellbent. I think it's fantastic, but I think that they're, you know, that for people who really got on with the one previous, Heaven Sent, wasn't it, where it's the Capaldi, you know, single on his own, the whole thing. It's quite an astonishing episode. And then along comes Hellbent, and it's quite disruptive in terms of, you know, not just the kind of story following from Heaven Sent, but also the way it kind of treats Time Lords and Gallifrey and the Doctor's relationship with them and everything else. And I've seen a lot of the negative stuff coming from Hellbent, which when he kind of boiled down to it, I think 90% of it is actually, it's just not what I expected. It's not the way I thought that story was going to go.
Yeah,
and
it goes back
what
to
I
normal,
think of.
you know,
Rassilon and Gallifrey and all that kind of stuff. So it is a difficult thing, and I think maybe it's one of those things that I'm broad brushstrokes here, but I think, you know, with maturity, you know, you sort of develop that muscle, I think, to sort of overcome disappointment, or maybe you don't actually. You know, maybe it gets more loose as you get older. So, or maybe it just doesn't matter at all, actually. It's just a way of training your brain to actually just think, do you know what, I'm just going to see what comes and, you know, take it or leave it. But
I think that's it,
I do think sometimes it's a case of, you know, you watch it once and not everything kind of sinks in. In certain Doctor Who stories, it's almost like too much is coming at you, certainly with a lot of the modern ones. And you need that time to sort of go away, let it settle, come back, watch it again, kind of knowing the shape of the story and what's going to happen, and then sort of relaxing a little bit more and letting more of it kind of saturate into the old grey matter.
Yeah,
possibly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you know. Anyways, that's just thoughts. Good conversation. I like it.
Good,
so,
good.
Fraser, tell us. Let's go wibbly wobbly and take you back to when you first became a Doctor Who fan. How did that happen for you, my friend? What was that shining light through the heavens kind of moment?
It was a Dalek went up the stairs and shouted "exterminate" 23 times at Sylvester McCoy.
Remembrance of the Daleks, episode 3, 2, 1. Yeah, I knew it. See, I just know this shit like that. It just comes right off my head.
Did you just happen to catch that on TV when it was on, or, you know, were you sort of watching it anyway? But then that was like a, you know, mind blowing moment, or, you know, how did that kind of do it for you?
You know, I was born in 1979, so I would have been 8 when that.
Same age as you, Jeff. Look at that.
Yep, Paul was about 30
out,
then,
so,
I think.
You know, there is a definite correlation between people who were born in 1979 and having Sylvester McCoy as being the first Doctor Who that they've watched and becoming fans because of, you know, season 24, 25 and 26. So obviously I was aware of Doctor Who before then. I have a very, very vague memory of watching Time in the Rani and the Doctor regenerating, you know, going from a blonde man in a red coat to a dark-haired man in a red coat. It's a total Mandela effect because the memory that I have is completely different to what is on screen. But, you know, I have that memory. I remember asking my mum and saying, you know, what's happening here? And my mum saying, well, he's regenerating, he's becoming a new person. I was obviously aware of Daleks before then. The Blackpool exhibition in the mid-80s I was taken to, and I remember there's a bit where you went round a corner and there was a Dalek in a case screaming "exterminate," and that was me, terrified from that point. So obviously I should have looked up the exact date, you know, in October in 1988 when Remembrance of the Daleks first played. It was a Wednesday evening up against Coronation Street, so I was at home with my grandmother. My mum did brownies on a Wednesday, so she was out doing that, so my grandma was the babysitter, so we'd watched Wogan And then went into the next programme. Next programme's Doctor Who. All right, okay. Yeah, I know Doctor Who. Let's give this a watch. Until my mum gets home. So went through part one. All the thrills and spills and excitement of, of Daleks. Getting blown up with the 809 and
it hits the ground running from the start, doesn't it? You got
absolutely does.
That battle scene at the start of it in the
it's so reminiscent of. It's a very modern era story. When you think about it, it's your big season opener, which has got all the explosions and all the action, but it doesn't skimp on the character detail as well. When you get into it with Ace and Mike and the Doctor and Jeffrey from Fresh Prince discussing trivia. But ultimately, what happened was at the end of that episode, that Dalek started going up the stairs to threaten the Doctor, and I was absolutely terrified of that. That absolutely sent me into a state of distress, to the point where the following week I wasn't allowed to watch.
Really? Oh, really?
The next episode. My grandmother refused to let us watch it on the basis that if I was going to be that scared, she wasn't.
She wasn't going to be responsible for it.
Not on my watch. Not on my watch, sort of
She's
thing.
Not dealing with that.
She let your mum deal with it.
So she actually made me video it. I had to video the episode and watch it the next day.
Oh, really? Yeah.
When
you were
home. That was good
when my mum got home from work.
Yeah.
I watch it in the afternoon when it was light and I wasn't going to be as scared. So that is kind of like the moment that made me a fan. Really, that is, the first time I can actually remember watching, an episode of Doctor Who, and that's a bit my convention story now. I've that a few times, So, that's the real origin. Moment. From there it was, watch the rest of season 25, then into season 26, and then somehow. Keep that flame going.
That's a good point, actually, because for both of you guys, actually, I think you would have come round to it because you, Jeff, you've always said it. Sylvester McCoy was your first Doctor.
I remember seeing Sylvester, and I can quite vividly remember Silver Nemesis and thinking the Cybermen were cool. And at some point around that time, Faisal, maybe a bit before, there must have been repeats or something, because I can remember seeing Peter Davison playing cricket, and I can remember seeing bits of Tom as well on TV, but that wouldn't have been when it went out for broadcast, I don't think, or maybe like you're saying, it's Mandela effect, maybe it was, and I don't remember, and I remember being and I've told this before, Paul, but being at my grandparents in Cornwall with my dad there, and wanted to go watch Doctor Who, and my dad said no, and my gran said, "Oh, let him watch it, dear." And it was I remember it was the last episode of Battlefield, and sort of I don't remember what was said on the on the broadcast or anything, but I seem to remember that was the last one, and then like you just said, like keeping the flame alive after that, So we've talked, Paul, and I didn't sort of do anything with it after that until the TV movie came on. Oh, I like Doctor Who. I'm going to watch that, and then it was years later when the new series started and stuff, and then kind of discover Target novels and things. I didn't know anything about any of that. As far as I was concerned, the Doctor and Ace walked off and they stopped, and then it came back a few years later. I didn't know any. There was a whole other world. Of stuff that I didn't know anything about.
Well, you guys would have been quite young as well, wouldn't you? So. I've got the date here, Fraser. 5th of October 1988. There you go. That's the date of episode 1 of Remembrance.
Yeah, so I would have been 8. And so that narrows it down even closer to about maybe 2 minutes to 8 on that evening.
So it's quite an early age to be introduced to something, and then for it to continue for another, just literally one more season after that. So you got 2 full seasons, and then that's it. Just finished. At which time you're probably 10, going on to 11, thereabouts, and there's no more Doctor Who unless or somehow come across things like the Target books or New Adventures, the comics, Doctor Who magazine, stuff like that. Did you manage to keep it going with that sort of stuff, the extended?
I mean, I've read one Target. when I was young, and that was the Dalek Invasion of Earth.
Oh.
I remember getting that from the library. I can't remember exactly when I read that. I don't know if that was, before or after.
Yeah.
The end of 26. But what I do remember is I wasn't aware that the series had been cancelled. As far as I was concerned, it was coming back. I remember having a conversation with my mum in the cafe of Asda one Friday evening as we were having something to eat before going and doing the shopping about Doctor Who, and say, well, when's it coming back, sort of thing. And my mum saying, well, it's not. It's done. It's been cancelled.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, oh well,
fair enough.
That makes sense because they had. Yeah, well, that kind of makes sense because in the last series they had the Master, they had Cybermen, they had Daleks, they had pretty much everything.
Yeah.
the
So
big ones.
I knew, enough of the program to know, what was going on with it. I think, when Davros appeared in Remembrance, it wasn't like a massive, who's he?
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
like, that guy. Yeah. So I was aware of the character of Davros. So yeah, like I said, I had this. One book which I read, and then that somehow, and just my general interest kept me going until I think it was 1992 or 91 or 92, because the very next story I remember seeing after that is the pilot episode.
Oh, okay.
The pilot version of
Unearthly Child.
Unearthly Child. The BBC repeated that as part of
They did, you're right. Yeah, I remember it.
They had a day of programming to celebrate Lime Grove Studio.
That's right.
I don't know if it was because it was just for the crack of it, or if it was being shut down or whatever, but they had a whole day of programming or morning of programming around that, and that was one of the things they showed. I think they showed
and I think that was the first time that had ever been seen on TV, hadn't it?
Yes.
It had never been used previously, never been transmitted.
Yeah, so that was, I remember watching that, and that's just awe-inspiring. When you are a young person who knows that they love this thing, knows that it's something special to have that very first episode drop with so many new things being introduced, the TARDIS for the first time, and seeing that first takeoff where it knocks everyone out, which it never does ever again.
I know, yeah. It's so mysterious, isn't it? It's so atmospheric, the whole everything. And I think in the pilot, it's kind of a little bit slightly darker. It's a bit more edgy, isn't it? I think they soften it up in the actual version. But sorry, I interrupted you. You were saying?
No, just that final shot where the TARDIS materialises in that shadow.
Yeah. Just kind of falls across it. Yeah, the landscape.
And that could be any. It wasn't until obviously I bought the VHS a couple of years later that you realise, well, actually, that's it's a caveman who have actually when a historical. We're not on, an alien planet. It looks very alien planet, and it could be anything, but it's not. So that was just, a startling piece of, television. So after that, the BBC again started repeating more and more stories. They had the sort of repeats that they were showing for the 30th anniversary, where they've had one Doctor. Story
maybe
from each Doctor, which
that's what I'd seen.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Quite possibly they showed.
It was a long time ago. My brain is foggy. Was it before or after the Silver Nemesis? I don't know.
I think they did the demons at some point, didn't they? Because there was
they did the demons
that was being recolorized, and it was kind of showcasing that technology. I think in a program that was tied up with it, and if I remember, something like that.
Yeah. They showed the demons. They showed the Time Meddler.
Yes.
The Mind Robber. The Sea Devils.
Sea Devils.
Genesis of the Daleks. Caves of Androzani. Revelation of the Daleks, and then Battlefield. Again, so again, that's just a really brilliant way of just dipping your toe into the entire history of the series. But the thing that really got me into fandom, it really got me into Doctor Who, was the VHS range. What everyone else has done with Target books, I did with VHS, and I was going out and buying. I had the at the time the catalogue.
Okay.
You used to get like a little
little booklet.
little booklets. Yeah, this is what we've got. Ticking them off and planning which one I'm going to buy next. And,
that's the fan thing, isn't it? Yeah, tick, got, want, tick.
Yeah, got, yeah.
You still get things like that in my kids' toys these days. Checklist.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's nothing so much fun as a checklist. Yeah, I used to do that in my Target books. Yeah, just tick them all off.
Yeah, you had a spreadsheet, didn't you?
I did have a spreadsheet. Yeah. I still got the spreadsheet because I need it now because I know what books I've actually got, so I don't buy them again because that's happened a few times.
Yeah.
Actually, more than once. Oh dear. Yeah, of course, because the VHS. I mean, we talk about the wilderness years, but in a way, there was probably more Doctor Who content coming out than I think we'd ever seen before, because that was when, like you said, the VHS, the videotapes took off, and we had UK Gold was on at the time, which is actually the first time I'd ever seen a lot of those old stuff. So I was, the years previous, for me, I was a little bit older than you two guys, but the Target books were my kind of window in Doctor Who, and then I became a fan in the 80s with actually Warrior's Gate was the first one I kind of sat and really took notice of, because I'm like, whoa, this is kind of freaky. I mean, sort of grown up with Brains of Morbius and those sort of things, but never really sat and took notice until I caught some of Warrior's Gate, and then through Davison. But for me, actually, a similar thing. Between the end of Tom Baker and start of Peter Davison, they repeated that, or they did that 5 Faces of Doctor Who season, which showed an Earthly Child and the Crotons and the 3 Doctors and Carnival of Monsters and then Legopolis again. And that, for me, was the first time I'd seen those old stories. Now, I kind of wonder if you sort of know that you're a Doctor Who fan. I mean, you know it anyway, right? I'm just sort of gatekeeping in a way here. But, I kind of think if you can, no matter what era you come into it, no matter how old you are, if you can watch it as it is now, love it so much that you want to see more, and then go back and watch some of those old black and white ones and think, wow, that's astonishing, really get the flavour of that and feel that frizz on in your blood. I think then beyond any question of a doubt, that you're a Doctor Who fan. You're born to be a Doctor Who fan, right there. That's what it is. Sorry, kids, but if you feel that, you are a Doctor Who fan. You may be in denial, but it's a fact right now. If you bought season 2 the collection,
embrace it.
You are a Doctor Who fan. Yeah. So,
Fraser, which Doctor and era would you say are your favourites? Or do you feel like you just love it all, but and there's no bad Doctor or era, which is kind of how we feel, isn't it, Paul? But you have one or two that you kind of gravitate a bit more towards.
I think growing up, in this era when I'm buying. Crossing off my list and buying VHSs and whatnot. I was very torn between the Pertwee and the Hinchcliffe eras. Yeah. There was a lot of Hinchcliffe released, not so much Williams era, Tom Baker, and obviously there was a lot of Pertwees because they were doing that thing where they were recolorising and releasing. And they were repeating them as well. So I watched a lot of John Pertwee in that time and a lot of Tom Baker, and those were. My go-tos. John Pertwee was just so
cool.
Dashing, and he was the man. He suffered no fools whatsoever. And then you've got Tom Baker with the witty put downs and the quips and that same sort of sense of humour that I have. So that really connected. Looking at it nowadays, I have got that massive love for the McCoy era. There's just something so, fundamentally good about it. We've kind of weathered that storm of the trope being that Sylvester McCoy was the worst Doctor. Just got trotted out. In Radio Times, and it's an easy joke to make when you don't know what you're talking about.
So that's easy criticism, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we've kind of weathered that now a little bit, and Sylvester McCoy is getting the recognition that he deserves, and Colin Baker as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Is getting sort of reappraised, and that season 22, it has got its difficult moments when the Doctor and the companion aren't getting on, and the Doctor isn't always a likable person. But you go back and you see what Colin Baker's doing.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
He's for all that he is, loud and brash and argumentative, he is undoubtedly the Doctor. He is one of the more Doctorish. Doctors. He is that absolute, rod of iron moral compass.
He is. You're right. You can. I always think you can compare the Sixth Doctor and the 12th Doctor side by side quite happily, and actually you can compare any Doctor and you find traits of them around. Some obviously tend to be more dominant, I guess than others. But I think we all know, don't we, that there was an intention for that journey for the Sixth Doctor to undergo a kind of journey of sort of softening up and through which obviously didn't quite happen, but he's got the range in every story he's there. And
absolutely.
Some of the stories aren't perhaps doing Doctor Who any favours. I was watching season 2 quite recently, and the Two Doctors is one of my favourites. I love it to bits. But there are moments, and I'd never thought about this when I was a teenager watching it. I was just gobbling it all up because I just loved it too much. But, there's some real moments where you think they probably didn't need that. Walking in, what's his name? Shockeye walking in with the Sontaran's half leg in his hand, and it's all just covered in green. And just an episode before, he just munching on a rat corpse. You know what I mean? You think when the programme's under fire, it probably doesn't need to do that. But still, it's a cracker. You just know it's Robert Holmes just having fun, and Eric Saywood just kind of just saying too terrified probably to take anything out because Robert Holmes is such an icon, such a legend. But I
think Eric Saywood's probably along for the ride and thinking, what am I going to learn from this?
I think you're right, actually.
This guy, walking in, he walks in with half a leg in his hand. That's genius. What can I steal from this?
More of that stuff.
The kind of the issues I have with that story is more the way the Doctor's portrayed. When he does dispatch Shockeye, towards the end, sort of like is that quip, and I think what you need to do there is kind of look at that through the lens of the culture at the time. It is an attempt to make the Doctor James Bond.
That's it. It's the really one-liner, isn't it? Which I think they did in Vengeance and Varos as well, didn't they? Or was it just there's a little look or something.
I mean, the guy falls into the
deep fat,
the acid bath, and there's a kind of a quip there, and that's very sort of 80s action hero.
Yeah,
isn't it?
It is.
So which is the time that it's in, and so you think, well, it's not what I want the Doctor to be doing, but it's kind of what people at the time wanted,
exactly. I mean, even like talking about John Pertwee, the third Doctor. I mean, I was just watching Day of the Daleks a little bit earlier on, and there's that bit where he comes around the house with a gun in his hand and just blasts an Ogron quite casually, because again he's just doing that sort of that sort of 70s action man kind of thing, really. Again, sort of James Bond and what's his name? Jason. Forget his name.
Fleming?
No, not Jason Bourne. The guy with all the beardy stuff, played by Peter Wingard. Can't remember his name now. I'll think about it. It'll come to me. It'll come to me.
Department S?
Yeah, yes, it was Department S. Yeah, and his character in there. You guys talk. I'll Google it. But anyway, you're right though, because you do have to, sort of look at the lens when. Well, do you have to? Should a program stand up on its own without you having to look through the lens? I think maybe yes, but it's unavoidable, isn't it? These things are art. They're always a product of the culture that spawned them. They're part of the zeitgeist of everything. So it's
and also the technical sort of state of things at the time as well. You can't watch them and go, oh, that's crap. But, the effect.
You can't watch Doctor Who and think that at all. No. That's just not a thing.
But at the time, stuff would have been maybe not so much for Doctor Who, but you know what I mean. Stuff that was as good as it got at the time. And you can't judge that sort of stuff by today's standards, because then you're just gonna prevent yourself from enjoying something on that angle.
I mean, the thing to remember is, in 20 years' time, today's standards are going to be outdated.
Yeah.
In 20 years from that.
Even more so,
you know, I have a very good filter for special effects and production values. You know, I've always said that as long as I can understand what you were aiming for in that story, then, you know, a wonky set or a, you know, alien made of tinfoil
doesn't matter.
Is not.
It's not enough to
gonna
spoil it, is it? Yeah.
No, it's not going to take me out that story. It's not going to, you know, spoil it for us. You know, the things that, you know, get me into a story is the story itself. It's that combination of the plot. You know, what plot? You know, what story are you wanting to tell us, and how you're going about telling it. You know, is it through your characters? Is it through your plot? What's your dialogue like? That is all. You know, what engages me in this show. You know, anything like, you know, the special effect is a bonus on top of that. So you go back to Remembrance of the Daleks. You know, you kind of see that Dalek shuttle coming down. You know, and that's an amazing shot, and the wind is blowing out, and you know, the special weapons Dalek trundling off, and you know, the crew blowing up half of London. You know,
it's astonishing.
That's just great.
Yeah, it is.
You know, that's the gravy on top of the meal for me.
Yeah, it is. You know, I remember that when it went out, and I was just so taken by it. I mean, I've always been a fan of Sylvester McCoy's Doctor right from the off. I think, well, maybe Time in the Rani is not my favourite, and I don't think he does himself or the production does him any favours in that. But nonetheless, there's an energy to that story and Sylvester McCoy within it that keeps you through it. And I just remember thinking, you know, there's definitely more to this Doctor. And then Paradise Towers, as the rest of it kind of unravels, I was absolutely... I love the Seventh Doctor. I think it's fantastic. And I remember going to school and you know, it's maybe slightly off topic, but I remember sort of defending Sylvester McCoy's Doctor with my buds. You know, nobody else watched Doctor Who now. They're all doing something else. There's me going into sixth form and everyone's like, oh, I was watching Doctor Who. Yeah, and I'm like, no, but it's really good. It's brilliant. And they're like, no, it's not shit. You know, what do you watch that? It's for babies, mate, and all this sort of rubbish. But I'm like, no, you know, it's good. Yeah, Doctor Who ain't what it used to be. Shut up. But then, of course, they come out with something like the Candyman. Now, again, right, the filter comes in. I'm like, no, I get what they're doing. You know, yes, okay, there's a bit of Bertie Bassett ripoff, but I get what that this character is psycho, right, and it's part of the whole kind of bizarre element, you know, the noirish kind of almost surreal tone to that story. It absolutely fits that the Candyman could look like that. And I know in the original they didn't want him to look like that, but that's how he came up. But it still works. And I thought, yes, I get this. I see it. Whereas you read the papers and it's all like, Bertie Bassett rip-off, Doctor Who has reached the bottom of the barrel. You know, when you think back to the days of Tom Baker and Davros and the Daleks, this is a different kettle of fish. You think, no, you don't understand it. You don't get it. These stories are deep, they're layered, they're structured. Like, your dialogue is brilliant, the story's fantastic. And then you get, like, Remembrance of the Daleks, which even blows out the water with brilliant special effects, and they're like, oh, yeah, the Daleks are back, whoopee-doo. It's like, fuck off. You know, sorry, my rage kind of set in. It was very difficult being a Doctor Who fan in the late 80s as a teen.
Twitter in print.
That's so funny because, you know, when I said, you know, I was born in 1979, so you can tell that I am a fan of Sylvester McCoy. If you said, you know, I was born 5 years before you, I could have pinpointed that exactly. I could have said that word for word. You know, that, you know, you were going to school, Doctor Who was a mockery. Remembrance of the Daleks came along. You said, fantastic, look how good Doctor Who is.
Nobody cares.
This is brilliant, blah, blah, blah. You've all got to watch it, and then the next one, it's Bertie Bassett, and then you were just backing you.
Or as I like to say, for every Earthshock, there's a time flight. For every Caves of Androzani, there's a twin dilemma. You know, that's what Doctor Who is. It builds you up and then it can throw you down again. But even within those cardboard, you know, those cheap budget end of the season kind of things, there's still lots to love in there. You know,
but
still
then
something.
It's, you know, someone else will think exactly the opposite of how you perceive
and that's the thing,
know.
isn't it? Because even whilst people are trashing Sylvester McCoy, you know, in the press and everything else, you know, there are people like you guys who are growing up with him as your first Doctor, and that's your way into the show, and that has kind of opened up all the other parts of the show as well, and given you all this stuff that we all sort of enjoy. And I think it's something that, you know, we sometimes forget that, you know, whatever Doctor Who is when you get older, it might not be the same as you were when you were a kid, but that doesn't mean to say it's any less powerful or any less magnetic or any less wondrous or fantastical or any of those things, you know, to new kids who are just experiencing it for the first time. That's their Doctor. This Doctor right now is that 9-year-old's way into the whole universe, and they've never seen David Tennant before. They've never seen Matt Smith. They've got no idea of that. The first Doctor Who, if they see, is the 60th. Well, they will be Tennant, but that's that's a different thing. But that's their first experience. That's their jumping on point, you know. And we can't suddenly say, you know, we can't turn around at people and say, well, you know, you're not a true fan unless you've watched, you know, the Talons of Wen Chiang backwards or something, you know, or sat through endless reruns of the Space Museum on a loop. Something like that, or unless you understand the reference, like what is it, Helmet for a Space Cow, you know, exactly when that came out. It's like, no, it's just fun for everyone, you know, adventures in space and time.
It shouldn't matter when someone gets into it, you know, like you said, that's what they discover it and they enjoy that, and that's what resonates. And if you know, if you're kind of a bit older and you think, oh, that's not as good as it used to be or whatever, it doesn't matter, you know. That's how they've got. And I always think it's a little bit like, you know, the Star Wars films. I'm not a Star Wars fan, but you know, people our age, you know, liked the original lot, and then they hated the prequels. But there was
I never hated the prequels. I love the prequels.
You're an anomaly, but there's people watching the prequels who are the age of those guys when they watched the first ones, and they love the prequels. And then the same thing will have happened with the sequels.
Exactly,
and you know,
right.
It's not fair to say, you know, well, they're shit. Okay, maybe they are, but someone who was your age when you discovered Star Wars has enjoyed that, and that's given them a love of Star Wars, which has, you know, progressed through. But, you know, just watch Grogu. That's the good stuff.
You like Grogu, don't you, Jeff? I know you.
I do like Grogu.
It's the only bit of Star Wars I think you really like, isn't it? The Mandalorian.
It's not that I dislike any of it particularly. It just never
It's just not your thing.
caught on. But funnily enough, you know, there's videos of me when I was younger, probably 5, at my aunt and uncle's in Scotland. They overlook Loch Ness, and I'm playing with Star Wars toys. That my uncle had a VHS camera, you know, so I liked it. You know, when I was, you know, younger, and you know, your sort of age phase when it was out and stuff, but it just never kind of stuck with me over the years. And then when Mandalorian came out, you know, and everyone sort of went mad for it. Eventually, I thought, I'll give this a watch. And
sighs as he's doing
it. Anything now that's got kids in it, and particularly father and son stuff, it gets me.
Because you can relate
and I was
to
like, I can relate to it, and I was like, he's little and green, but he's lovely, you know. and I particularly like the Mando character. I think he's, you know, kind of upstanding and decent and, you know, moral and all that. And you know, the fact that there's a helmet, but you can still kind of relate to him through the vocal work and stuff. And, you know, it's a great show. And I know enough about Star Wars to kind of to get it, you know, the bigger picture on it. But mostly I'm interested in them and their journey. But I don't watch any of the other stuff because
fair enough.
I'm not that bothered, you know. So
you much of a Star Wars fan, Fraser?
Very much like Jeff. You know, grew up with Star Wars. Star Wars was the thing. In the 80s, wasn't it? You know, Star Wars, Back to the Future, Indiana Jones. Those were the big sort of things in growing up. So it was a part of growing up, but you know, it's never kind of ignited that, you know, interest and enthusiasm like Doctor Who has. You know, it's again just going back, you know, confirm what you were saying there. Obviously, my son is 10 now, and he loves the prequels.
Yeah.
You know, he loves, you know, Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
And it's I'm trying to find other words to say than god awful.
It's not for you.
It's not the best. It's not for me. Yes, it's not for me.
But
obviously it is for him.
Yeah.
You know, he loves it. You know, he genuinely loves that. He'll watch that again and again. You know, he is a 13th Doctor fan.
Yeah.
You know, he's not like a massive fan like we are, but you know, we sat and we watched all of series 11 together.
Great,
you know, on broadcast. You know, it was the perfect thing for us at that time. We'd just had our second child, so he would go to bed at 7. It was a Sunday night, so Luca would do his homework, would put all out to bed, and 7 o'clock was the time for me and Luca and Bianca, my wife, to sit and watch Doctor Who together. And so we had that those 10 weeks of of doing that, and he was well caught up with that. He had his 13th sonic screwdriver and everything. He's kind of went off the boil a little bit with Doctor Who now, but we did sit and watch Flux because I'm here.
And top parenting, my friend, right there.
If you want your dinner, it's Flux.
It's funny because he kind of turned off on season 12, when the previous stuff was coming in back in, when sort of the Master was back. It was, I think he made it to Orphan 55, and then he didn't pick up after that. So when we went into Power of the Doctor, it was a bit like, is he going to follow this? Is he actually going to?
There's a lot to get.
Even Flux. I did the Trap One podcast special on the Vanquishers, the last part of the Flux, and what Cy Hart, the host, did there was asked us all for our predictions of how that was going to wrap up, and so I gave him mine, which was obviously that the Quarks are going to turn up and defeat Swarm and Azure. But I also asked Luca as well. I said, what do you think is going to happen at the end of this? And it was actually Luca's predictions that were the most accurate.
Really? Oh, that's good.
on that night, I think.
But it would have. I mean, I love it, but it would have been better with Quarks. Anything's better with Quarks. Just stick the Quarks in.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what.
Do you remember when?
Go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say. Remember when Saranga Conundrum came out? And Twitter was like, it's the worst episode ever, absolutely terrible. And I thought, well, I really quite enjoyed that one. And I showed my kids Pating the next morning. So my son is 8 and my twin girls are 5 next week. And I thought the Pating was brilliant. He burped and they laughed. Oh, he's gross, look at his butt, And I thought, Doctor Who is a hard show to make for many reasons. But they're trying to appeal to, the oldies like us. The youth and the actual youth who are under 10, and it's a balancing act, so the people who hated Saranga Conundrum for whatever reason, my kids who are 5 and the girls are probably a bit younger at the time, but they liked it.
Love it.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so that's showing it's a bit like the Star Wars stuff, just because it's not for you doesn't mean other people won't like it and get a different thing out of it,
I've probably watched Saranga more than any other Jodie story because
really
that's the one that Luca kept putting on. He kept going back to this one of the pregnant man and the Pating, and I'd put the Ghost Monument on and turn around, and next thing I know he's got the buttons. Saranga again.
Skip.
I think also with Saranga Conundrum, there's a really nice sense of rising tension throughout the thing. It kind of builds and builds, and it's
it just rattles along, doesn't it?
It's great,
and it doesn't stay at any particular thing.
It's very fast.
Is it a base under siege? Is it a it just kind of keeps moving and keeps evolving as it goes along. So I've got a lot of time for that one.
I actually think it's similar in a way to 42, the Tennant story. Again, another Chibnall story, isn't it? Yeah. The structure's very set. It's very tight. It's very contained. It's all on one ship, and the problems just escalate from one, almost like from one countdown to another. But the whole thing is a giant countdown towards the end, and it's and then along the way you kind of find out lots of different little things about other stuff about the universe, about that, that particular setup and their background, and it's all in 42 minutes or 50 minutes in Saranga or whatever it is. It's cracking good stuff.
Do you know
I
probably
actually
said this before, Paul,
invented a new genre to describe that type
of
story.
Did you? Share, please.
It's the kicking the can story.
It's official right here. You probably didn't hear it here first, but nonetheless, you're hearing it here now. That's it.
The plot just kind of kicks the resolution down the road
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so Orphan 55 is another really
Yeah,
good
you're right.
example of that. In the Ascension of the Cybermen, because every step that the Doctor takes doesn't resolve the problem.
Yeah,
It just
makes it slightly out of reach again.
you know, it solves it for that particular
it's like
5 minutes,
short-term
whatever, but then you've got a
fix,
new
and then-
problem to solve,
Yeah.
and then you've got to solve that one, and then it just kind of kicks the resolution, you know, further down the road. So there you go.
I like
it.
that.
I like it.
I
Yeah,
like
that's
it.
very good. You should trademark that, Fraser. Put that on your epitaph, mate. Oh, yeah. Kick a resolution down the road. That's what that is. Yeah. So, actually, do you know what? There's, that's a bit also like Caves of Androzani, which is very much like that as well, actually, which Jeff still hasn't seen and which he needs to fix and
I'm
remedy.
waiting for the collection.
Yeah, when we do it, mate, we're going to do like honestly, we are going to do about 20 episodes around Caves of Androzani, because I could talk
Yeah, but
about
we only
that
got
for
one about Kill the Moon.
days.
So let's move on to Big Finish.
Go on, then.
Fraser, tell us a bit about your experiences with Big Finish and stuff that you like or listen to, or if you don't, we'll just skip on to question 4.
There's not much to tell, really. I've not, you know, experienced a great deal of Big Finish. You know, I've got one mortgage already.
Tell me about it.
You know, so sorry, Nick Briggs, but you know, I can't. There's
that's fair
that
enough,
much
yeah.
now of Big Finish that, you know, you can't, you know, keep up with everything.
No, not without an unlimited
unfortunately.
budget and the time to listen to it all.
Yeah.
as well.
Well,
I
that's the
think.
thing, you know.
I mean-
we've talked about this, haven't we, Paul? Something came out a while ago, and you know, saw it. You know, they say on Twitter it's available now. Oh, I ordered that. Oh, I'll download that. And I looked on the Big Finish app or the site, and I was like, oh, I haven't downloaded that one either, and that one,
Or that one, or
and
that one.
too. Oh dear. You know, how what have I been doing, and how am I going to listen to these? And you know, I've got some I just, you know, I haven't listened to yet, and I think, you know, you guys can probably relate as you get older, and particularly when you've got kids, you know, your time for that sort of stuff becomes, you know, well, you know, any of it really, music and, you know, blah blah blah, and it becomes limited, doesn't it? And you just can't fit it all in. You know, I've got you know, someone asked me today how am I enjoying the new U2 album. I said, yeah, it's amazing, but there's 4 CDs to listen to. I haven't got enough time for 4. I could probably get through one, you know, a couple of times, but you know, I haven't got time to listen to any more Big Finish and stuff. So it gets difficult, and not to mention the scope of it all as well, like you said.
Yeah, the sort of earlier stuff is on Spotify, or was on Spotify, I believe. So, you know, I have managed to listen to a few. You know, you go for the big hit as you go for like Spare Parts and in Jubilee, which are you know, excellent stories. The Chimes of Midnight is one that I've listened to and really enjoyed there as well. So, you know, it's a fantastic thing, Big Finish, because it was, you know, you look at the Wilderness years and you think, you know, what kept us going, you know, what kept that flame burning. You know, we had, you know, we had sort of things around the 30th, you know, Dimensions of Time, all these VHS releases and everything. Then we had, you know, the sort of TV movie. You know, we've got the new adventures being released. We've got the, you know, Missing Adventures.
Yeah, all the Virgin and BBC books,
You know, and that's kind of petering out a bit, and then, you know, so coming into the start of the century, you get Big Finish coming up, who are kind of giving a new lease of life to the show. You know, it's audio adventures, and it's original cast members. It's Sylvester McCoy, it's Peter Davison, it's Colin Baker, and then it's Paul McGann as well.
Yeah, I remember that. That was really exciting when they got Paul McGann.
Yeah, I remember getting the you know, that's another one I have listened to, the Storm
Warning.
Storm Warning, yeah.
Yeah, you know, the first sort of like Paul McGann one, which Doctor Who magazine gave away on a free CD. Do that again, Doctor Who magazine.
Yeah, do it again. Yeah.
See, for anyone listening who doesn't know what a CD is, it's a round
piece
disc.
of media, a little disc around here. You put it in a thing, and it plays a thing, and then you hear sounds through your phones. It's what it is. It's like, you don't have to wind it up enough. You just plug it in, and it goes. It's magic.
And if you've got
those
no
people all turned off when I mentioned VHS.
Yeah, they're not listening anymore. Yeah, they're gone.
And the good thing about
I'm not done with that acronym, Grandad.
If you've got no signal on your phone, a CD will still work for you in your car.
Yeah, this is true. Although actually, because Big Finish do their download and CD, and they're getting rid of all their CDs as they go out of print and not doing them. So when I have ordered a Big Finish, I tend to do the CD and the download. But the chances are actually I listen to the download and the CDs are still in their little cling film packets.
I stopped buying the CDs,
and I haven't got space for them either. Which
I do like to buy, a physical, release. Like I said, I've got the U2 one in the 4 disc
twice
version.
he's mentioned that now. I don't think he's getting paid by Bono to keep mentioning it.
I haven't got onto Avatar yet, but I don't need the CDs for Big Finish stuff. I'm not going to do anything with those. Like it's not in a nice box or anything. Although the 10th Doctor ones were, and I went for those. But I think all Big Finish stuff generally, is really good. But it's just you just can't listen to all of it. I think so. You just kind of have to pick, individual stories that really appeal. Or the Doctors that you like the best. Like I like the Unit series. I listened to that. Or I saw there was a 4th Doctor Ice Warriors one recently that just came out, and I thought, that might be quite good, but I've got other stuff I need to get through first before I get hold of that.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit of a victim of its own success, isn't it? It's kind of evolved from where it started, where it was, just those 3 or 4 Doctors, and now it's it's companion series. It's all the Doctors. It's first, second, and third Doctors. It's daughters of companions, voices of those companions.
There's lots of little continuities. I wonder if they got like a continuity board at Big Finish Enterprise offices or something. It's like a massive cyclorama of all these intertwining timelines, maybe.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what,
probably some like massive Isha type.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Where it folds in upon itself.
Pull down wall chart that just keeps going and runs out into the car park. And,
but of course, when they do other stuff as well, like, because I recently started getting into the Blake 7 audios, because Blake 7 is another big thing with me. I absolutely love it, and I haven't watched it again for a little while, so that's coming around. But of course, I get the little alerts on my phone with a few things I have notifications for, and Big Finish did this sale where they literally download all this Blake 7 stuff for like 99p. So I thought, I'll give it a go. I kid you not, honestly, I listened to the first series. I thought, this is the best thing I've heard Big Finish come out with. I thought it was even better than the Doctor Who stuff. That first series of Blake 7, it was, when Big Finish first started and you listen to Sirens and Time, it's like, oh my God, they've just got it. And then you maybe perhaps become a little bit blasé, and that becomes the expectation. They're always going to have got it, so they want more and more. But listening to a different title, because I haven't listened to any Space 1999 or Sapphire and Steel or any of that stuff at all. I've literally only listened to Doctor Who Big Finish until I got the Blake 7. I thought, bloody hell, that's good. Really, really good. And there was a script in there by Andrew Smith. I'm going to plug this one. And it is just, honestly, I think it's up there with the very best Blake 7 stories. It's so good. It's brilliant. So, I have to feel like we're kind of advertising. We're doing Big Finish's job. Not that they need us to do their job, but we do talk about them a lot, and we interview a lot of people from there, don't we? So, but kudos. They're doing a fantastic job. So you can't knock it for that.
This is it. Like I say, it's a really big part of the fandom.
It is, you're right.
It is, yeah.
We are joined by our very special guest, Choom from Twitter, Mr. Mestor the Magnificent, aka Peter. How are you doing, Mestor, aka Peter, sir? Are you well?
I am very well indeed, thank you, and feeling very privileged and honoured to have been invited onto your podcast.
Yeah, that's right, mate. The paycheck's in the post.
That's very kind. You got the script. Well done.
And of course, those dulcet tones are also provided by Mr. Jeff, my long-suffering co-host on this very podcast. How are you, Jeff? Have you had a good day, mate?
Yeah, I've been looking after 4 kids today, so
awesome.
You think you're on tired? Well, actually, Peter, how many kids? Oh, you're on half term as well, I suppose, aren't you?
He's a teacher, mate. He's on half term. Yeah.
I am, but I look after, what is it, about 150 kids a day, so...
Oh, all right.
And then I come home to my own.
Yeah.
Your own 150.
That's Mestol's been pretty magnificent for that one, that's for sure. Yeah.
Busy.
Indeed, yeah. Is it a comprehensive grammar school or a primary school? Where do you teach?
It's a secondary school, an independent school here in the northwest, and I spend the day job when not obviously tyrannising the population of Gioconda. I teach English.
Oh, fantastic! Have you been doing the teaching job for long?
Far too long. I'm coming up to 19 years this year.
Wow.
Oh, really? Wow.
20 if you include the year I spent training. So, near enough 2 decades in the job.
Wow. And still enjoying it?
Enjoying it would probably be nearer the mark. Yes, I do. I enjoy it enormously. Yeah, I'm very lucky to be teaching where I do.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, my sister-in-law is a teacher as well, and she enjoys it as well. But yeah, there's it's tough sometimes, isn't it? I think and
it is. It's the management that does my head in more than the kids. The main part of the job, being able to talk about books and stories all day, is just a dream.
Yeah, that's kind of what she said. Yeah, the sort of the official side of it. I remember I did a talk at the school she teaches at a couple of years ago, and I talked to three classes of kids, and at the end of the day, this is really before I had kids, I was absolutely knackered, and I said to her, "You do this every day, like fair play." It's when you don't do it all that often, it's quite tiring, isn't it? Having to, keep on the ball like that all the time. And at the end of one of my sessions, I said to the kids, "Well, I hope you've learnt a little bit today." And this kid down the front went, "No, we haven't learnt a bit." And I thought,
we haven't learned anything. That idiot's been standing up talking at us for 4 hours.
I thought, you cheeky git. And he went, "We've learnt loads." And I said, okay, wow. Yeah, so that was really nice. So maybe he was
beautiful, mate.
Put up to it. I don't know.
It's got me choked up right there. You see that?
Yep.
Emotion.
Look at that. Emotion.
I'm emoting.
For people not watching on YouTube, Paul is currently in floods of tears.
Yeah, I literally am. Look at that.
Yeah. All right.
Happy tears.
Yeah. Just stop.
Am I overdoing it? Right, okay, before this conversation gets any more surreal, let's start talking about our favourite subject, Doctor Who, for which Mestor the Magnificent has gorgeously dressed up in the 7th Doctor tank top. That is fabulous.
Yeah.
Look at it, with all its question markness and everything. It's brilliant. Where did you get that?
I'm just trying to remember. I think it must have been one of the Forbidden Planets, because it's not the Dapol one, because Dapol did one, if you remember, way back in the early 90s. I think this came from Forbidden Planet. I've had it for longer than I'd care to admit, and it's really on occasions like this that I can actually get it out and wear it. I promise I don't actually sit and watch Doctor Who in this, when I'm just casually watching.
But if you do, you can tell us here. It's absolutely
fine. Well, if I was going to admit it anyway, it would be here. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, that's brilliant.
And we should say, for people who are listening and not watching, you've got a rather impressive Dalek behind you as well, haven't you?
Look at that.
Yes, I have. It's a This Planet Earth replica of a Genesis Dalek.
Wow. So, where did you get that? Was it from this country, or did you have to ship it in from somewhere? And what did it cost? And
no, This Planet Earth are a British-based company. They've been making licensed replicas of Doctor Who since I first became aware of them in the mid-90s. I remember seeing a flyer in Forbidden Planet and thinking, I must have one of those. And of course, there was about 15 at the time, and they are a ridiculous price. But this came about because after I'd completed my first year in teaching, at the time, English was a shortage subject, and so to get you to stay on in the job, they gave you at the end of your first year, if you completed it, what they called a golden hello. And that was a payment of about £4,000 on top of the usual salary. And at the time, I didn't have a mortgage, I didn't have any dependents, and all of a sudden, I had this huge chunk of money, and I thought, what am I going to do with this? And
I
that,
know.
By Dalek.
that was
That's
the
the
result.
result.
The This Planet Earth Genesis Dalek.
Yeah, that's
fantastic,
fantastic.
isn't it?
I
No,
thought I heard
that,
of
that's
must
the
admit,
price now. I mean, this is going back
Is it
to
really?
2006, and now they're near enough £4,000.
Wow.
I think this one was just short of 2,000 in the day, so they've gone up
Yeah.
an enormous amount in the last few years.
Yeah, I've not heard of them actually. I've heard of Rubbertoe, who make the Sonic replicas, and they do
Yeah.
like a limited number, and like the 13th Doctor's one was metal, for example, rather than a plastic replica.
Yeah.
And I must admit, I looked into those because I love 13's one. I thought that's awesome, and then I looked at it, I was like, there's no way I can. Get a £300 Sonic,
You'll
and
stretch to that.
yeah, that my wife is not gonna let that one go.
Mate, can you imagine you turn up with a £2,000, £4,000 Dalek and say, "Look what I bought, my love!" Hey!
and at least Pete, for you, you bought that. Maybe if you had your partner back
No
then
mortgage,
or anything,
all of
no
that,
mortgage.
yeah.
It was there before adult life kind
Commitments.
of commitments and
Absolutely.
things,
I mean,
yeah.
I was living with my parents at the time, and This Planet Earth actually delivered it on a weekend when they were away, and it
Brilliant.
came
Oh, right.
on the Saturday, and they returned home on the Sunday to find this built in the dining room. And I'd sort of prepared them beforehand, but I think that they're still certainly trying to get over the shock.
So long delayed, yeah, that's brilliant.
Fantastic, yeah. So does the Dalek occupy a very special place in your house then? Do you keep him in, or does he move around locations?
He's recently been moved down here. I thought it was time when I was sorting out the Doctor Who book collection last summer. And prior to that, he'd actually been on the landing, surprising people who were new visitors to the house, because he used to be on the second landing. So if you were new to the house and you went to the bathroom, you'd go onto the first landing, so the Dalek would be behind you and you wouldn't know he was there. And then when they came out of the toilet, they got this shock because there was the Dalek on the landing. But when I got this display behind me sorted, I thought it was about time he took up pride of place. And it also gave me an excuse to dust him, because they are incredible dust magnets. So it was a good opportunity to actually get him spick and span and polished.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
But he's pride of the collection, pride and joy.
What you need to get yourself now is a ring modulator, so then you can really scare the crap out of people.
You should
Well,
set it up
I
so
don't
it's-
have a physical ring modulator, but I do use I can't remember the name of the software, but I've done quite a few Dalek voices for various amateur productions, so I tend to use because some of the software is very good indeed for the ring modulator effect. So that tends to be what I've used when I've done sort of a little bit am-dram stuff, and I've made my own animations and things like that on my YouTube channel. So that tends to be how I do. Dalek voices.
We'll have to give a share of that. Yeah, you could set him up so he's got some sort of proximity sensor, so when people go and have a closer look, it's
lights come on, the stock moves.
Goes off. Yeah.
I know that you can buy a voice. I think you can get a speaker, which you can put inside. And the lights, actually, if you have the electrical know-how, which I don't, you can actually hook them up to this voice
Wire
unit,
them up,
and then
brilliant.
it has
So they
the
go in
sound
sync.
and the lights as well.
Yeah.
That's pretty good, isn't it?
That's
But
pretty
it's
good.
completely, I think, because, as I understand it, in order for them not to end up with insurance claims of people injuring themselves actually operating the Dalek, it is completely hollow. So it's not like the ones that you see at conventions that people have built at home. It's there's nothing inside. It's completely hollow. But there is a space where you can put the voice unit and connect up the lights, should you wish to do so.
Should you wish
Indeed.
to, yeah.
And then it's on you, isn't it? Then it's nothing to do with the manufacturers. It's
Yeah,
totally on you. If you electrocute yourself, then it's your fault. Nothing to do with us, I'm afraid. Yes, you're on your own there, Sunshine. You want to hook it up to lights and a voice box? Yes, it's perfectly fine, but we didn't advise you to do that, nor did we give the means, and that's legal. Yeah.
That's it.
That's my solicitor's voice. That's exactly the voice I use.
I'm just looking at their website, actually.
Hey,
Yeah.
I'm just googling it. Look at that.
Yeah,
There's
and
an
they've got
impressive
powder
range
and
of
Daleks as
stuff.
well.
I mean, the Cybermen helmets and look really
Yeah.
good. I
got
think they've
K9
even
as
started
well.
doing an Ice Warrior, which would be pretty
They
impressive.
have, and they got Weeping Angels as
Ooh.
well. They've got a door
plethora.
a door plaque type thing of one of the heads coming out, which is quite good.
They used to do a K9 at one point, but I think they stopped doing that.
Yeah.
And they used to do the TARDIS as well. I'm not sure they
Yeah.
do that anymore.
They've got it on here, and they do have. It says, yeah, they got the Jodie one, and then looks like they got all the others as well. But I can't quite tell whether you can buy them or not. I'm not saying I'm going to buy one live on the podcast now.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Jeff buys TARDIS live on our podcast. That's content, mate. Right there. That's what that is.
I don't know where.
That's what we need.
Where on earth would I
Yeah.
hide that?
I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah, anyway.
whilst Jeff is
whilst,
doing that,
whilst I get my wallet out.
yeah, indeed.
Peter, tell us what Doctor is your favourite, if you have one, and which era is your favourite as well. You know, you've been there from quite you know, the early days relatively, not as early as Paul, but you know.
Oi. Behave yourself, young man.
In spite of the garb that I've chosen to wear this evening, I sometimes feel a bit like I'm betraying Sylvester and Sylvester's era because I love it, you know, unreservedly, and it was the era I grew up with. However, my favourite Doctor and my favourite era would have to be the Jon Pertwee era. I just think that I came to Jon Pertwee's stuff very early because I remember for Christmas 1988 I got Death to the Daleks on VHS, and then the following year, it was a year until I got my next VHS, so post season 26, the next VHS I got was Day of the Daleks, and then that was followed quite quickly then by Spearhead from Space. So I was aware of Jon Pertwee as a Doctor long before I'd seen Tom Baker in anything, and certainly long before I'd seen either William Hartnell or Patrick Troughton. And I just think there is something, for me, it's my ultimate comfort Who. And if I'm ever in the mood to watch a Doctor Who story, and I'm not following a marathon like I am at the moment, more often than not, I'll default to a Jon Pertwee story because I just think it's an incredibly special era of the programme. And although it's obvious that, you know, throughout the eras, people are enjoying making it and they're enjoying what they're doing, you can detect the family atmosphere of the Pertwee era, I think, when you're watching the chemistry on screen. And also the fact that it splits into three very distinct sections. Season 7, which is unlike anything else. And funnily enough, and this may be heresy, it's actually my least favourite Jon Pertwee season because I just find that Silurians and Ambassadors of Death and Inferno, they just go on for too long. You know, if you shaved a couple of episodes off here and there, I mean, they're absolutely marvelous. I enjoy watching them, but they're not my go-to, apart from Spearhead from Space, which is just God tier, as far as I'm concerned. Then, obviously, you've got the Joe Grant era, which is incredibly special. And then, although it tends not to be most fans' favourite, I really, really like Season 11. I think it does something different with the Pertwee era while also retaining that sort of coziness and that sort of chemistry. And another controversial statement, and I'm full of them because I tend to find most of my opinions about Doctor Who don't chime with the rest of fandom. I actually think that Sarah Jane Smith works better with Jon Pertwee than she does with Tom Baker. And that's something that I've felt for quite some time, but I just love that era so much. Yeah,
that's an interesting view. I think you're wrong. No, I don't. I like Pertwee with Sarah Jane as well, and sometimes when I sort of think about it, you know, he had two kind of, you know how most Doctors have, you know, an iconic companion, you know, that you picture them with. and for me, the fourth Doctor was with Sarah Jane, and maybe Leela after a lot of audio stuff actually, but Pertwee, it's usually Joe Grant, but there is something special about him and Sarah Jane, and they were really good together as well. But
I think their time together is actually quite short as well, isn't it? 'Cause it is only that one season.
Yeah,
and she's just really starting off in the character. It's quite interesting when you look at was it the Time Warrior, which is her first one. That's her establishing the character, and she's really strong in that. She drives her position through the narrative, and then we get, is it Invasion of the Dinosaurs straight after that?
It is, and she's brilliant in that as well.
She's fabulous, yeah. But then we get Death to the Daleks, in which she's just like random companion, and there's very little character in the. You can see, can't you? Nation just scripted that for a generic female Doctor Who companion, and Liz is doing what she can to bring something to it, but. It's probably one of the reasons I'm not a massive fan of Death to the Daleks, actually, because it's almost like a Terry Nation sort of puzzle book. You're just putting his kind of usual things together, maybe mixing it up a little bit because the Daleks are given machine guns rather than their usual kind of blasters exterminating things. But essentially, it's kind of by the numbers Terry Nation. They rock up on a planet. There's a plague. There's somebody called Tarrant somewhere. There's a mysterious city. There's some sacrificing to be done. Sarah Jane almost comes under the cosh of an Exelon knife at some point. I must admit, it's not my favourite, but again, you got to look at these things in context. We've had a lot of stories since then, which have kind of followed that shape, that story structure, and maybe it's retrospectively jaded for me, actually. Because maybe it wasn't quite so cliched at the time. I don't know. I'm just reaching. Reaching.
Daleks can do no wrong for me because it's the first person serial that I ever saw. And
it's special.
I can go back to it time and time and time again. And it's one of those that it's.
Now I feel bad. I feel
no,
horrible
not
now.
at all. It's quite a divisive story in fandom, because if you look at some of the polls on Twitter, some people absolutely slate it and think it's a dreadful story, and then you've got others like me who champion it to the hilt, and you can see all of its flaws. But I stand by this. I don't think Michael Bryant directed a single bad serial of Doctor Who. Even Colony in Space, which is not universally loved. Revenge of the Cybermen, again, it falls into that divisive. A bit like Death to the Daleks. Some people can't stand Revenge of the Cybermen. Others, like me, love it. And then, of course, you've got the Green Death and you've got Robots of Death. I just don't think he ever did anything wrong, personally.
Yeah. That's a good take. I like that, and I think this is like the charm or the magic of Doctor Who in a nutshell, isn't it? Because certain stories are special to all of us in different ways. Whether it's because it was our first one, or because our eyes opened perhaps when we saw a particular story. It just spoke to us directly, or something happy was going on in life, or whatever it is. And that's quite when you feel that, it's quite harsh when people then attack it for being bland or boring or whatever. It's like, well, no, this is my special story, man.
And that's it. That's so much of it. It's what it means to you and how you've engaged with it. And it might be bad on paper or something, but if you enjoy it, that's what matters.
Absolutely.
Really.
And Death to the Daleks does have. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say I'm blessed with quite a good memory. I can usually remember where I bought the VHS tape of any given story. And so most stories, up to a point, have got some sort of nostalgic connection. And I think a lot of it, I can see all of the flaws of the Twin Dilemma. I really can. But I adore it because hence why I chose that particular Twitter handle. Because I think it gets an incredibly bad press, and yet to me, because of the nostalgia and the fact that I just find it an incredibly entertaining hour and 40 minutes of television.
But that's it.
In the same way that people champion. I'm not a huge fan of season 18. There's quite a few stories in season 18 that I find quite a slog to get through. I don't like Meglos. I don't like Warrior's Gate. And there are others in there. I mean, the Keeper of Traken is worthy but dull, I think. But for some people, they absolutely adore. I'm sorry, no, I beg your pardon.
Hello.
I've made a terrible faux pas there. I didn't mean Keeper of Traken. I meant Legopolis. Legopolis is worthy but dull. I actually quite like the Keeper of Traken because it comes close to being Doctor Who does Shakespeare, which I really quite enjoy. But again, there are those who adore season 18 because it's where they came into the programme.
Exactly. That's me. That's me right there. Yeah.
It's what what you individually everyone enjoys. It's,
it is. Yeah, that's it.
Kind of.
But like I said, it leads for good old debate.
Well, I love the debates on Twitter. Except when they get nasty, which they do occasionally.
Yeah.
That's why,
quite
a while ago, I stopped using words like best or worst, because any sort of art is subjective. So I now tend to talk about favourite and least favourite now, because something that I consider to be the best Doctor Who story ever. It's going to be agreed with by certain members of fandom and others. I've seen quite a few people talk down Remembrance in recent times. There was a point where Remembrance seemed to do no wrong. For me, Remembrance will always be the best Doctor Who story because that's what turned me into a fan. But I don't tend to refer to it in that way now. It's my number one. It's my favourite, and I just think that circumvents some of the more hostile responses one might get by proclaiming that something is the best or the worst or whatever.
The best.
Yeah.
It can be quite quite a conflagration at times on the old social media, but
can it?
We're all adults, We can be responsible up to a point. We can set a good example for the kids.
So, Peter, would you say you're more of a classic Who fan than new
definitely. Who? Something about the revival era of Doctor Who has never ever appealed to me. I gave it a chance. I wanted to love it, and to me, it's a different program. I think it's made in a very different way. Yeah. I think some of the narrative decisions which have been made, I haven't liked. I probably allow my dislike of the people who are making it as well. I've always found, and this will be an awful thing to say, I've always found RTD a little bit arrogant. I don't like his attitude, and I think that has coloured my appreciation of I found I didn't. I've stuck with it. I've watched every episode, bar I think there's one or two of the Peter Capaldi era that I still haven't seen, and I'm not really in any rush to go and see them. But it's not me wanting it to be the classic series, but it turned me off almost immediately. And this is one of the reasons why, as a fan and as a collector, I have very, very little revival era merchandise in my collection because it doesn't inspire the same enthusiasm in me as the classic series does. And I don't think that's just nostalgia, because Doctor Who had been off the air, 7 years when the TV movie came along.
Yeah.
And I remember watching the TV movie. It was in the half-term break when I was doing my GCSEs. And I remember sitting down on that bank holiday Monday and just being blown away by it and thinking, this is marvellous. Bearing in mind that this is going back to the day when Doctor Who magazine as a publication, and again, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, maybe I'm getting it wrong, but Doctor Who magazine was much more... Its approach to the programme was much more critical. And I don't mean critical as in only finding the bad things. It tended to look at both the good and the bad, and there was a lot of scope for discussion. And I remember the overall impression I got of the TV movie at the time was that it wasn't widely liked. That was certainly what I took from a lot of the journalism in Doctor Who magazine. I absolutely adored it and was really disappointed when it wasn't then. Yeah. And bearing in mind that was to some extent tonally different because it was so filmic, it was set in America. None of that mattered because to me it felt like Doctor Who. I know Doctor Who is many, many things, and that's one of the marvellous things about it. but I don't think it works as kitchen sink drama and soap opera. And to me, that's what we got with the RTD era.
Yeah.
And it's something that for me has never really changed. And that's one of the reasons why I find it very, very difficult to connect with it. I've tried going back and rewatched certain stories that I remember as being maybe better than others. But there's nothing there. To me, there's no spark to it. The format is wrong. And I'm probably being rather irrational in some of the ways that I look at it. But all I know is it has never clicked with me since that night in March in 2005 when Rose went out. And although I've stuck with it, and although I still watch it, I watch it with a sort of passing interest. But it just doesn't grab me in the way that I can go back time and time and time again to the classics and never ever be bored by it.
That goes back to what we were just saying, though, that everything, any art, it connects differently with people, and you're and you're obviously hugely passionate about the classic era, and I can understand the new era not kind of quote unquote working for you, because it's faster paced, it's very different in its structure, and you're right, the RTD stuff was very kind of soap opera kitchen sink stuff in a way, and I can also on the flip side see why people who got into it with the new series have found certainly some earlier classic stuff harder to because it's so slow and there's so many episodes to parts to a story and stuff, and it's entirely valid on both sides, and that's all
the new series kind of research sparked your interest in it, didn't it, Jeff? Because like you were saying, you'd kind of lost track of it after it finished. Effectively. So if it hadn't have come back with a TV movie and then the revived the Russell T Davies stories, then
Doctor Who would probably say there was no more after the TV movie. Yeah, God, never really thought about it. I don't know what would have happened. It might have been something that I might have seen, in a on DVD or something eventually. So, I remember that.
I remember that from way back when. And think of all those new fans who come on board, who found, who discovered it on in 2005 onwards, and and they're sort of carrying the flame forwards. I can see it from both sides really, because I must admit I would, I don't know, would I think up until the recent, probably series 10, I think, until then, I would have probably more likely to switched on a classic story just for my comfort watch, than any modern episode. Maybe a couple of Tennant episodes I can kind of just, because they're quite short and you can devour them quite quickly. I think that's sometimes a good thing. But if I wanted something a bit more meaty, I would probably still put a classic series on until we got to series 10. I think that was for me when actually, because I actually quite liked the Rose and the early RTD stories, and then they tended to get a little bit formulaic, and then they sort of sparked up again with towards the end of Peter Capaldi's run, and it's almost actually like I'm sort of looking again at a lot of Capaldi stories that I didn't like at the time, and actually kind of reevaluated my approach and thinking, actually, do you know what, that story, I mean, a good one is actually Robots of Sherwood, which I didn't really enjoy at all first time round, and then I watched it again a few times. I think, actually, no, I kind of like it, and I'm finding out with a lot of these things, it's. Sorry, I'm rambling. I'm totally rambling. I'm just realising, but
I think one thing I wouldn't take away from the revival is the fact that it has brought so many other fans on board, some of whom I've met, and it's really obvious that they have the same passion for the Tennant era or the Matt Smith era as I do for Pertwee and the rest of the classic series. And I think as well it has sparked a reinterest in the classic series, and we had
absolutely.
a certain upswing of classic merchandise as a result of the popularity of I suppose we can't really call it the new series anymore, can we? Because
not anymore. No, it's
but what is it now?
You're right though.
Years?
Like 16,
more.
17, I think, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, where are we? 2023. So if
nearly
we're
20
looking
years
back on 2005, that is like watching like watching Attack of the Cybermen. Or as Attack of the Cybermen that's our new episode, but the one we're watching is from 1965, so that could be like The Massacre or something like that, a late Hartnell story.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, for me,
That's amazing, isn't it?
When the show came back, I thought, oh yeah, I liked Doctor Who. I'll check this out, and I watched the first 3 Eccleston episodes as they went out. And then I had work and missed them for a couple of weeks, and then I bought that still inconveniently sized TARDIS
Big
box set that
charity shop staple.
And I watched them all in a weekend, and I was like, oh yeah, this is great. I'm loving this. And then as that went on, I started to kind of go back into the classics a bit, buying the single story Blu-ray in DVDs and stuff, and I remember going to the 50th anniversary event, and then the Capaldi one that they did a couple of years later, and buying those and going into Smiths and buying them and stuff, and like HMV would have them on sale for $5, so you could get 3 for the price of one, normally, building that up and kind of going back to stuff in the past. And I remember always being pissed that Silver Nemesis was part of that 3-story box set, and I always found that it was too expensive to buy just to get that one, so I'm still waiting on that because I remember that one from when I was younger. But yeah, so I obviously I knew of the the classic stuff, but the revival kind of got me to go back to it in a way that I hadn't originally, as it were. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for joining us this week, everyone. It's always great talking to other fans.
Yeah,
and so if you're listening and you want to join in on a future Meet the Whovians, let us know. But
Let us know. Yes.
Yeah, just drop us a DM, let us know. And we'll be back next week with more from Dom and Felix and Mestor. And we'll catch you then.
Bye for now.
Bye.